All right, y'all, spilling the tea on mega church finances. So this is from the Skeptic Pastor on TikTok. I've never seen one of his videos before, but then I was scrolling the other day and this video popped up. I watched like the first 20 seconds and I was like, you know what? Let me save this conversation to have with the YouTube fam. So apparently he used to work in a mega church and he's going to break down all the financials and, it sounds like it's going to be like a negative type of stance when it comes to mega churches and how much money they generate and stuff like that. And I think that's an interesting question because, money itself is a tool, it's a resource. And much like any other resource or tool, you can use that to benefit society or you can use it to the detriment of society. Like, a pastor or a YouTuber, for example, could get a lot of money preaching the gospel. They could get a lot of money from their church, right? I think it comes down to how you are stewarding that blessing. If you're just going crazy, going buck wild, letting the money change you, worshiping the money, making everything about the money, the sole purpose of what you do is money, 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 money. Obviously, that's evil. That's why the Bible says, that love of money produces roots of evilness because you're just chasing and you're doing things solely because you want a bigger bank account, not because you want to glorify God, but you want a bigger bank account, right? And I don't know how y'all feel about even, for example, from like a YouTube perspective. I sometimes I think about this too. From the perspective of like YouTubers making money and stuff like that, specifically like in the Christian space. And I know majority of Christian YouTubers, from my knowledge, they monetize and they sell merch, they have books, music, other side businesses. Like there's a lot of business to be had in this industry. I'm specifically talking about like Christian, like YouTube industry or even like Christian content creator. There's a lot of business to be had in this industry. And I'll be honest with you, I've had a lot of different ideas, a lot of different business ideas, but I even had to take a step back and be like, you know what? It's okay to make money. It's okay to want to have a, successful business, but what is the main thing? Is the main thing Christ? If the main thing is Christ, I don't have any problem with it. But if we're diverting our attention away from Christ and onto the money and onto what we can produce, through what God has blessed us with, then I think it starts to become a little bit problematic, So like, I don't know. I've said too much. I've said too much. Okay, let's get into this video.
Who's ready to spill some more tea on those megachurch finances? Yes, I used to work in a megachurch. I no longer do. I'm not really sure they're a good idea. What a lot of people don't understand about megachurch finances is a couple of major expenses. All right, so utilities on these buildings are like $10, $20, $30,000 a month or more. And that sounds like a lot until you realize that their staff bill is way bigger. What that does is it very quickly escalates to millions of dollars required to keep the organization afloat, to keep it running. And those dollars are not just random dollars. They're people's families, right? There's a huge staff that is feeding their families off of that money. And so all of that creates this like massive weight to the organization. The thing is, these aren't...
Okay, wait 1 second. I mean, these are people who are choosing to support the church, though. They're choosing to tithe. They understand that a portion of that money is going to go towards the staff. They understand that. And I think if you have a church, no matter the size of the church, I think that if the leadership is of sound mind and of sound judgment, and they're leading the church in the right direction towards Christ, then let the blessings flow in. Like if that church is a blessing to the community, if they're changing lives, if they're truly saving souls, if they're truly making an impact in their community, then the support of the church to help pay for staff or help pay for utilities is all for the advancement of the kingdom. That's if, assuming everything is happening morally and of sound judgment, right? I mean, if they're doing just corrupt things and just buying jets and buying Lamborghinis and, doing, the most elaborate Christmas parties possible and, getting a full steak lobster buffet, like if they doing all of that, then, there might be some reason to look into the books. But if they just keeping it legit and they're being a blessing to the community, in the community, the church wants to support them in doing that, then that is for the greater good of the kingdom, in my opinion.
Profit companies that are set up to handle this kind of thing, where they spend some more on marketing, is feeding their families off of that money. And so all of that creates this like massive weight to the organization. The thing is, these aren't for-profit companies that are set up to handle this kind of thing, where they spend some more on marketing, sell some more things, and make some more money. These organizations are funded almost entirely by personal donations. And the lion's share of those donations is concentrated in like a handful of people most of the time. By handful, I mean like less than 10. So the tea. So we're having a staff party at this extremely rich person's house, and it's getting towards the end. People are starting to leave. I end up walking into a room where the owner of the house, the mega donor that is goes to this mega church, is finishing a speech that at the tail end sounded like he was defending apartheid. For those of you who aren't familiar, apartheid is systematized racism that happened in South Africa and Southwest Africa. So we get on the bus to leave the staff party from this guy's house. Yes, it's a bus. Mega churches are very weird. But I sit next to my friends who were in the room, and I'm like, what was going on in there? And it turns out that the random thing that I thought he was defending apartheid was true, but that was like the least racist thing he had said. And that's as according to these people who grew up in the South. They said this was some of the most racist things they'd ever heard out loud. So at this point, I'm sort of ending my time at this mega church and really disenchanted with it, but I can't let this go. And so I talk to the senior pastor and I say, look, here's what happened. This guy said these crazy things, and you need to talk to him at the very least. I mean, this is really, really bad. And the pastor said, yeah, I will totally handle it. This church was involved in all kinds of anti-racism work. I mean, it really was something that had to be addressed, not just because it was horrible, but also because it was the exact opposite of what this church stood for publicly in the community. So I checked with the pastor a little while later. Hey, how did that conversation go? Oh, we didn't, we're going to schedule it, whatever. And I say, okay. Then I check with him again. Same thing, scheduling, I don't know, Then I check with the pastor again, and he's like, oh yeah, it was just a misunderstanding. At this point, I'm ready to go, and it's one of the thousands of the last straws that make me say, okay, there's nothing I can do. And then, a year later, I'm talking to a staff person, a person who works there, asking about this guy, because it's a crazy story, and they tell me that he has been promoted to the highest leadership position that a person who's not like a clergy person or a staff person can be. He's like on that level.
Jeez.
And this is not surprising.
Super donor. He's a super donor. A super donor. Try to say that 3 times fast. It gets kind of dicey. I can kind of see where this story is going. We're gonna watch to the end, but I'm assuming the church didn't do anything about it, because if he is a top donor, as it sounds like, that church understands the consequences of letting that person go. You're probably losing a large percentage of your revenue to pay for the building, to pay for your employees, to pay for your outreach. You're losing a large portion of that. And from the church perspective, they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to lay people off. They don't want to stop the missions and the goals and the initiatives that they have for the next upcoming year, right? But at the same time, you got to ask yourself, and this goes back to like the love of money and like ultimately, what do you have your faith in? God was just dealing with me not too long ago about, what do you have your faith in? Is your faith truly and wholeheartedly in God, or is it split between something else? Because like from this church perspective, they should just wash their hands clean of this guy and say, look, we don't support, what you stand for and some of the things that you have been saying in terms of like the racist, stuff. We don't support that. Assuming this is all true, we don't support that. And look, like, we don't want your money anymore. That's what they should do. But when your faith is split between God and money, then that decision becomes a little bit more tough to make, because then it's like, bro, how are we going to pay for stuff? How are we going to pay you? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this outreach stuff? But they should just have their full faith in God to say, look, if we let our top donor go, I know that God's going to replace it. He's going to replace it. They should just have that faith and walk in that faith. But, sometimes it's easier said than done, right?
Happened over and over again. People who had no business in the way that they lived and talked and thought, being in part of the leadership of that church, were constantly put on there, like the person who was verbally abusive to staff over and over again, or the person who told their child that they were going to kick them out unless they did conversion therapy when they came out to them, right? That happens over and over again. And the reason
Wait, hold on. I missed this part. I don't know. Is this taking a turn? Hold on. Let me go back. I just want to make sure I understand what he's saying.
A clergy person or a staff person can be. He's like on that level. And this is not surprising, because that happened over and over again. People who had no business in the way that they lived and talked and thought, being in part of the leadership of that church, were constantly put on there, like the person who was verbally abusive to staff over and over again, or the person who told their child that they were going to kick them out unless they did conversion therapy when they came out to them, right? That happens over and over again. And the reason that it happens is because of the money. Because there is this enormous burden that the pastors and the leaders are carrying, this bill of staff and utilities. And for them, it's not just like random dollars, it's actual people. And the way it works with all of these donors giving all of this amount of money, if that person leaves, it's not just that person leaving, it's actual staff people that won't be able to feed their kids eventually. And that's how some of these leaders are processing that. And that's why they make these sort of weird moral or ethical decisions. But why didn't the staff say anything when the guy was talking about it? Well, because they're part of the same system. They have stood up for their beliefs and been criticized. They have said things to people, to some of these donors, and called them out on stuff, and then had their jobs at risk, or worse, were fired. It's a system that is built on this money problem that ends up making people do horrible things.
Yeah, I think once you get to a certain point of money, it could definitely become a burden. And people always say like more money, more problems and stuff like that. But it really is true. Money changes a lot of things. It could change you, your environment, the people around you. It could change a lot of things. And I think if you're not aware of what's happening, it can definitely become a burden. And then you start to put your faith in the money as opposed to putting your faith in God. And then you have stories and situations where you have churches who have to bow down to a few members because those members of the church are the top donors. Whereas it was never supposed to be like that. You're not supposed to serve a person. You're supposed to serve God. But if you're more concerned about the money and the business side of it, then you start to compromise. And then you start to make more worldly decisions, and those worldly decisions can lead you further and further away from Christ. So that blessing that was once a blessing of finances, if you're not aware of what's happening, it could quickly become a burden because we're human. And money, at least right now, money is the ultimate resource. Everyone, whether you want to admit it or not, everybody wants more money. Okay, but what happens when you get that? You can talk about the person that you're going to be, what you're going to do, who you're going to donate it to, how you're going to, treat people when you have all of this money. But what happens when you get the money? You don't know until you're in that situation, until you are there. But I think for a lot of people, we don't talk enough about the preparation and the seasons before you even get that blessing. Because the seasons before you get blessed, whatever that blessing, may be that you're praying for, the season before is one of the most pivotal is one of the most pivotal seasons, because that's the molding and that's the character development season. And that's going to set you up to be a good steward of that blessing. But I don't know. It is what it is. I don't think all super churches are bad, but it's tricky. When you are generating millions and millions of dollars and you're literally running a business, but like he said, you're not set up as a for-profit. So when you have to rely on tithes and offerings and donations and things like that, it gets a little dicey. But I don't think all super churches are bad. I think there's, good super churches. I think there's bad super churches. I think there's, good small churches. I think there's bad small churches. Like, it is what it is. Like, but at the end of the day, we can't put our faith in people. You have to put your faith in God. And that's why I always say, like, if you have a negative experience with the church, or if you have a negative experience with somebody in the church, don't let that experience base your emotions or how you feel towards God. Don't let that experience affect your relationship with God. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let me know what y'all think. Get in my comments. I'm out, y'all.